The main job anyone has as a leader is to find their successor, and to do that, you've got to have honest discussions, but then support and show the way.
Welcome to The Fearless Foodie, the podcast that gets honest about what it really takes to thrive in food and retail. I'm Amy Wilkinson, coach, speaker and trusted partner to food industry teams with lived experience of the pace, pressure and politics that come with the job. Fearless Foodies cut through the fluff and get straight to what actually helps, and that's exactly what we're here to do. Let's dive in. Today's episode's all about innovation, but not in the way most food businesses talk about it. Because let's be honest, when we say innovation in this industry, what we often mean is new products, another SKU, another flavour, an extension of something that already exists. But real innovation is much bigger than that, isn't it? It's about how teams work together. It's about the culture of the business. It's about how curious people are. And it's about leadership creating those conditions where new ideas can actually happen. My guest today is David Hamilton, who spent decades at Kerry Food Group, and he became the Chief Innovation Officer, working across global teams to build innovation capability inside the business. This is a great conversation because we talk about why innovation isn't just the job of the MPD or R&D team. We have this conversation so often, don't we? But why both insight, data, all of that stuff, and instinct both matter, and what leaders need to do if they really want innovation to be more than just a buzzword that's used in the organisation. And stay with me at the end, because after the conversation, I'll put together a few of the key takeaways from David's experience. And especially if you're working in MPD, technical, innovation, commercial roles, and trying to drive innovation inside a busy food business, there's some really interesting insights in this. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Fearless Foodie podcast. This week, I am joined by food industry legend. He's probably going to cringe when I say that. David Hamilton. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Hi.
He's like, shh.
I'm not,
do you know why?
Not happy with that.
No, not happy with that. I'll tell you why I say that, because I reached out to you because your name kept coming up in conversations, positive conversations, I would say.
That's very nice.
And you've how do I say this? Been around the block a bit.
Yeah, I'm old.
And you have worked in the R&D innovation space for a long time. So, I'm really looking forward to this conversation and talking about all things innovation, what you've seen across your career and all of that sort of stuff. So welcome. So give us a potted history of your journey into food innovation and what you've done across your career.
Okay, so I trained as a chef first. I started at 16 and studied for 5 years as well. So I was working 7 days a week for the first 5 years of my working life. And then from the age of 25 to 28, was running restaurants, but sadly health issues meant, I needed to change career tack, and moved into a role as a product development manager for a dairy company in the very early 90s. And just 1 year later, got the opportunity to join Kerry Foods, who were creating a consumer foods business. It's very early on in their start, really. And I pretty much strapped myself in and worked and grew with the business. And as the business grew, I moved into larger R&D roles and then functional leadership. In time, I was invited to join the Kerry leadership team as the business's chief innovation officer across all categories, all businesses, bringing innovation to the top table, which was quite key. And then moved into a Kerry Group global role in a similar vein. And then for the last couple of years, I've sort of been semi-retired.
Although from what you've told me, you still work really quite hard.
I'm a bit busier than I planned, but I enjoy it. If I can give a bit back and help people, that's great. But now I'm supporting a range of businesses, really from startups right through to multinationals, and really focusing on areas of culture, team capability and innovation.
Yeah. So you sort of grew up with a business that grew up as well with Kerry. And I guess, so you must have done quite a lot of like forging what innovation was within that business, like you sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost
we trailblaze.
Learning as you go. Trailblaze. Trailblazing. Yeah.
And look, I was never anything without amazing people around me, and built fabulous teams who have all gone on to do amazing things and are very senior around the world and in the industry. But we set up different teams in packaging, in artwork, in design, in future thinking. We worked with futurists. We did everything we could. I used to work with the Dragons, still do actually. As who could I talk to find out stuff and be ahead of the game? So we started that very early on, but again had brilliant people around me that answered what I couldn't. And that's the important thing. It's never down to one person. So yeah, but we all learned together. And look, the CEO and I are great friends to this day, and we learned together. We'd be driving to retailer meetings, going, "What the hell are we going to say?" We just learned as we went, and really, really good fun. And we supported each other wholeheartedly as the business grew. And God, it was hard work and long days. I mean, we'd be packing on a factory line. We'd open a factory, and it got so busy before we were ready. We'd do our day's work and go and help on the factory lines. It was all hands on deck, really. Yeah, great fun.
So never been afraid of hard work, and I was going to say always been winging it, but I'm not saying that you're winging it, David.
But you have to with it. Yeah, you have to.
But you do. Yeah. It's part of innovation, right? Is being brave enough to wing it a little bit. Because,
brave
but I think it's and I think it's really important for people listening, particularly people that are earlier in their careers, to hear that from somebody that's well established, has built a career that actually at some point we all feel like we're winging it.
But it's like anything in any business. The more you understand about business, your consumer and the market you're in, you are winging it because what you're doing is new, but you've got lots of background information to make you feel 80% safe. And if you're not feeling slightly nervous, I'd question you're not pushing the envelope enough. That's a bit.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things that we talked about when we were planning what we were going to talk about was how sometimes we can get wrapped up in trying to be as safe as possible when it comes to innovation. And there's so much data out there now, isn't there? And there's everybody's looking at the same thing. Everybody's looking at the same consumer data or the same back data. There has to be something where you have some sort of leap of faith that you can't rely on that.
Yeah, and the business needs to support that. That's a culture thing, and I think we'll talk about that at some point. But a culture of safety is critical. We have to be allowed to fail, to try, to test, but with as much knowledge as we can. So, but it's not too risky. I mean, we can't be crazy.
Yeah. No, this isn't about just doing any old. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's not about having a scattergun approach, because you do see that sometimes in businesses where people have they kind of call it innovation, but actually there's no real insight behind it. There needs to be some sort of insight. There needs to be a need. Otherwise, it's not innovation. Yeah.
Don't ever underestimate the importance of central insight teams or insight teams you work with. They are business critical, especially these days. But there's plenty of other ways to find other information as well. So again, you glue them all together.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned the word culture and innovation culture, because I think two things come to mind for me. A lot of businesses I work with, or a lot of MPD or R&D teams I work with, feel like innovation is seen as a separate function that is, the function of, they are the only people in the business responsible for it.
And it's in their title.
Yeah, because it's in their title. But that's not reality, right? There's something else going on in my head, but we'll come to that in a minute. That's not the reality, right? So how do you create that innovation culture, and why do you think it's so important that it's not just seen as a function of R&D?
Yeah. No, I was really lucky in Kerry, and I think if I think of the original leadership team, all of us have gone on to have incredible careers, and we've all stayed in touch and support each other, 20 plus years on. So that culture was built when we were learning, I guess, the hard way. But one thing I realized is that innovation didn't stop with me, although I had it in my job. And innovation could be many things, but I also needed everyone in the business to come to the party. So manufacturing and technical and operations and commercial, marketing, insight, all these individuals and these functions. And I used to think, why am I trying to think of everything? Because actually everyone else plays a vital role in creating what an idea could be. And sure as hell, I didn't have all the answers. And, from the CEO down, through all those departments I've called out, together you create and find the future. And if you're aligned on that, then you find ways to deliver different innovations. And I think it's important to recognize that innovation isn't just a product. It could be a process. It could be a new commercial model. It could be a new piece of kit or technology in the factory. It could just be some fabulous insight that changes the way you word a product on a pack. It can be so many things. So I think when all departments, find ways to innovate together and it becomes the existence of the business, you've then got a culture, and everyone should play their part in that and be excited to do so. So I think that's the key bit here. Innovation isn't just for someone with R&D in their title, it's for everybody. And if a business can drive that, then you've got the culture.
Yeah, and I think there's a real learning in there about what the mindset is across the whole business in terms of wanting to improve, wanting to do things differently. That is what innovation is. Because when you were listing all those different ways, like processes, I always come back to the person sat in finance that thinks that they're not creative or they're not innovative, and then they come up with an amazing spreadsheet that does something that revolutionises the way costings are done or something like that. Like, that is innovation because it unlocks something that wasn't there before. So it's...
I'll tell you a little story. One of the biggest wins I created, but the team and I created, was working with the finance team. So for 2 weeks, I sat with the finance team saying, there's an opportunity here for consumers to shop differently. They want to pay a different figure. How would we create a product that is this price in cost so we can sell it at X? And then what does that mean for the ingredient costs, the amount of shots I can put in the pack? And we ended up with, we're one of the first 2 for 5 models in the ready meals market. To do that and do it well, we needed to have a product that looked great, but we could afford to make. And it was sitting with an accountant for 2 weeks, just working out models, the line speeds, how many could we pack in a minute, how fast would the lines need to go so we could be as efficient, and then create the cost. So again, look, finance play a huge role. It's a case in point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that people remembering that, because I don't know about you, and I know you've worked with other businesses outside of Kerry since you set up your consultancy. Sometimes it can feel a little bit like those different departments are not necessarily working together. They're working against each other. But, in that example, if you want to put the business to move forward, you've got to find ways to pull those different people together. So it sounds like you sat there, it's literally having those human relationships and sitting and helping to unlock that yourself is a big part of that. Not just expecting people to see why they need to, get to a certain figure, actually working with them and working through it.
Yeah, sharing and going on the journey together is really what makes the difference. And again, it just comes we talk about culture all the time, and it seems a very on-trend word these days, but it's critical. And if everyone in every department thinks, what is the role I play in this new project, then they're in. They don't sit back waiting. They're saying, I've got ideas, I've got thought. It makes life a lot easier. But again, that has to come from the top down, without a doubt.
Yeah. And one of the things that I get frustrated with, and again, when I moved it, because I was similar to you in that I only worked in my employed roles, I only worked in a couple of businesses. And since I've set up on my own, I obviously see a much wider spectrum of the industry. But one of the things that I really notice is that R&D or MPD don't always have a seat at the top table. So there isn't always an MPD director. Sometimes they report into commercial or they report into technical or talk to me about that, because I know this is a passion of yours as well.
Well, I had to wait to sit at the top table, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But if an innovation leader or an R&D director doesn't sit at the decision-making table in a business, then I would probably suggest that the business isn't serious about driving innovation. And that role can be marketing-led, it can be R&D-led. But are you having those strategic discussions about the future and how you invest in them and how you drive them? I get the point I was going to mention, because when I was hoping to go onto the leadership team in Kerry, the CEO sat me down and said, you're not ready yet. And he gave me some, I'd say, honest, what I would call kind feedback. And I spent a bit of time having some coaching and thinking about how I was working, because I was too fast, not willing to wait. I was pushing. And, when you're working at the top table, you have to understand the wider challenges of the business. You can't just be there going crazy with ideas. You've got to be quite thought through and structured with your ideas and reasoning. So I think, yes, you need someone fronting innovation at the top table so that those conversations become regular. And that individual does need to be very business savvy and also recognise the role of being a leader. I know innovation is their main aim, but they're also there to help the wider business deliver across any pillar that they're talking about.
Yeah, so there's something in there about how you needed to have a breadth of, I always hate using the word because I always think, what does it even mean? But it's that bigger picture thinking. It's not like it only gets you so far thinking within your function and thinking about how I get my agenda pushed forward.
Yeah.
It's actually, we've got to start thinking broad. You've got, to get to that level, you need to start thinking differently. And some of the behaviours need to change, right? Because what gets you to a certain point, which is like working 7 days a week and working really hard and pushing your points across, will get you to a point, and then it actually becomes the blocker at a certain point.
Yeah. Timing is everything, and it's sometimes you listen and sometimes you pounce. It's reading the room, it's understanding the pressure the business is under and making sure that innovation sits within the discussion but at the right time so that you do get the hearing. But it's just important that it becomes part of any company's mission and vision, I guess, if they truly want to grow and grow differently. It's very easy to continue renovating, but at some point it's a race to the bottom. It's about how you drive your future differently. And let's be clear, innovation might be the way people work. It might be the way teams work together. It can be so many things. We always think of it as product. And at the end of the day, you want to get to a great product innovation, but actually you might change the culture. You might change the way people work. You may change expectations. You could argue all of that fits within an innovation mindset. So it can all go under that heading. So again, your conversations at the top table may be about product 4 months on, because you need to talk about how we work differently together first.
Yeah. And there's two things going on in my head. One is, what stops businesses having this innovation culture, do you think? What do you think gets in the way of that? And that kind of ability to take risks, I guess.
Yeah, I think innovation isn't really an exact science. It's important to recognise that it can sometimes fail. But if you're not innovating, then if you want to be number one or number two, and I'm presuming most businesses want to be that, you fundamentally need to innovate. So I think it's giving permission to the business, being comfortable with failing now and then. I'd like to think you wouldn't fail too often if you've done your due diligence. But it is so important for your customers, your consumers, and staying ahead. And if you can get that culture in the business, then you could have 10 innovations launched in a year, but only 2 would be in product. The others might be in different ways of working, might be in automation, might be in realizing you can pack products totally differently in an environment in a factory. So I think it's just important to keep the conversation going and be brave. But I can't stress enough, it's got to be at the top table being discussed. And if it is, then you give permission through to the business to start pushing back up. So you sort of push down, allow ideas to flow, allow questions to flow, and then individuals will push back up with opportunity and thinking. It's an ebb and flow, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's just pause for a moment, because I want to share something with you that might be quite useful. Ever chase a test result at 5:59 p.m. on a Friday? Yeah, we've been there too. That's why we're proud to be partnered with IFP Labs, a lab network that actually gets what it's like to work in food. They support businesses across Europe with accredited testing for food, feed, swabs, water and more. And they do it with a quick turnaround, expert insight and genuinely reliable service. IFP Labs is a laboratory network made up of companies who we know and trust because they're already supporting the people behind the products you love. Check them out at ifp-labs.com and breathe a little easier next time you've got a product launch riding on that test report. Something I hear all the time from people in the food industry, whether that's in manufacturing or retail, is that you've got really capable people in the team. They're great at thinking, great at ideas, great at grafting. But when it comes to influencing the room, especially when it's cross-functionally or there's senior stakeholders involved, the message doesn't always land. That's exactly why we created Fearless Influence. It's a practical program and it's designed specifically for people working in food manufacturing and retail. And it helps them to communicate clearly, challenge, but in a constructive way, and to influence decisions. So if you lead a team and you want them to start stepping up more and step up in meetings, come and take a look at the Fearless Foodies website. And if you're listening thinking, I could really benefit from this, or other people in my team could, send your manager in my direction and I'll do what I can to help. Right, let's get back to the episode. I think there is something that's so important about that, like you talked about it being giving people permission to fail sometimes. But I think also from the top, I've seen this as my business has grown, that that's a thing. And then you're like, I don't really want to fail. Like, it's okay if those people fail, but I don't want to fail. And I think as a leader, you have to be willing to fail yourself and talk about that and
be honest,
and admit it and be honest so that people are able to do the same. I think that's the only way. You can't say one thing and then do another.
No, and
so you've got to be brave yourself.
Authenticity is critical. And I think in this day and age, everyone wants a bit of permission and accountability. And if you can do that the right way, then you have brilliant workforces. If you're just going to tell them what to do every day, they'll just do that and go home. I think the more you can ingrain them in a culture and give them permission that makes them feel they can be brave, that gives them accountability, they enjoy that. I enjoy it. People enjoy it. Why wouldn't you? And it doesn't matter at what level you're at or in what role you're at. If you're given some accountability and trust, then it tends to work. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. But so many people don't do it. So you give people, you give people permission. And you demonstrate it yourself in your own behaviours. That's how you start to create the culture of innovation and change culture.
Yeah.
The other thing that you talked about, and I loved your example of the feedback that you got when you were moving up that level, because I think it's important that listeners know that you're not just saying, it's about everybody can be a failure all the time, because it doesn't mean that there aren't standards, right? And feedback is part of that. And I know one of the things that you've talked about, you said the word kind in the feedback.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think being kind or they get it mixed up with being nice. And nice is something that we all have to do. And it's, look, how are things going? Well done. Things are okay. It seems to be, even someone comes in the day looking fab, you go, wow, you look amazing. These are nice things to say. You could argue it's a little superficial, but it is important. Being kind is a very different word, in the sense that it puts people's best interests at heart, even if they don't always see it initially. It goes much deeper than being nice and takes more time. And a good example would be something like an annual PDP. And I know everyone rushes to do them and they're always last minute. And I've read and seen many where just people are nice and they go, no, everything's fine. Do I need coaching? No, everything's all right. But that's not how you help individuals grow. And why it's really important to discuss what is going well. It only helps individuals more to suggest where self-growth can benefit the person, and then if there is an opportunity, you then need to follow through and bring that to life. What's the journey to getting there? Some of it may involve coaching, training. Some of it will be self-learning. Some of it will be step up the attitude a bit. It's all sorts of things. But in doing it the right way, with the right discussion and an opportunity to then grow with that discussion is critical. And if I think of myself, and I'm loving it so much now because I can give back, but any leader's role is to create an amazing team of capable individuals and to find the next leaders. I mean, the main job anyone has as a leader is to find their successor, and to do that, you've got to have honest discussions, but then support and show the way. So I guess kindness, having the right conversations and supporting and guiding. And it must be ongoing. It doesn't happen for 1 week a year. This is ongoing. Help people see what's great and how they can grow.
Yeah. And you've obviously learned that over the years. What I see quite a lot is that people are too nice and aren't necessarily, like, you can be too nice because you're not necessarily giving that feedback. And a lot of people have a fear of, if I tell them that they need to improve this, that, or the other, they are going to react in a certain way. They're going to cry or they're going to shout at me or all of that. But actually, you're doing them a disservice by not doing that. And actually, you're just doing it to keep yourself comfortable. You're not helping that other person grow. So, a lot of the work I do now is helping people to have those conversations in the moment. Like you say, don't leave it until a performance review meeting. It's picking it up in the daily conversation. But again, the more you do it, the more it gives other people permission to do that as well, so that they
Exactly. It's a evolving situation for everybody, but it's not easy being kind. It takes thought. You might need to have a bit of training. You might need some help as you start that process, but it is absolutely critical. If people are complacent and failing to adapt, I guess not holding people to account just creates issues in the business at all levels. So
yeah.
talking honestly and openly, but helping is critical.
Yeah. And that holding people to account, it's become a running theme when I'm doing team coaching. A lot of the time people are like, they'll do a certain amount of it, but then they don't hold themselves or other people accountable for actually doing what they said they're going to do.
Yeah.
Which actually segues quite nicely onto talking about cross-functionally, because this is the other thing that I see MPD R&D teams getting frustrated with, in terms of, we've talked about innovation isn't just their job, but equally, like, an MPD process isn't just an MPD team's job. All departments are involved, but there's so often this feeling that other people don't do the stuff that they should be doing, or don't don't care as much, or don't do the things. So what's your advice for people on that, in terms of getting away from that silo mentality and actually holding people cross-functionally accountable for things?
It's a hard one. Well, it's not easy, but it's hard, but it's not impossible, I guess. That's what I was trying to say. It comes back to sitting down in a room with the right leaders and saying, how are we going to work differently? And are you on board? I mean, if there's complacency in a team, if there's dishonesty, if there's micromanagement, if there's discrimination, it's not going to work. It's about sitting there and agreeing some ground rules and saying, how are we going to go on a journey together? Now, normally that would start with a leadership team and a lot of questions being asked. And when I'm looking at culture, a company will ask me to come in and sort out X, Y, or Z. I say, well, that's fine. That's your view. But let me interview quite a few of the people and understand what they really think and what they're saying. So I think it's really important to listen to individuals first. But yes, you've got to get around the table and start debating how you change. And change isn't always a bad thing. It's normally a good thing. Some people will be nervous of it, but again, you go on the journey together and you support each other. And if that's at leadership level down, fantastic, but it doesn't have to be. It might be just within a department, but then it's how do you bring in other departments to be a part of that process and that discussion. So it really is sitting around the table, and it's a big bit of what I do these days. And I don't know anyone that doesn't have the answers. When I sit interviewing people and then start bringing together an ambition, the teams have the answers. They know. It just hasn't happened. So I think it could probably happen pretty much anywhere in any team, because I'd be surprised if most don't know what needs to be done.
Yes.
And then if there are a few that aren't willing to play, well, maybe they need a little bit of kind discussion.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. And when I'm doing training and stuff with teams, we always start with the phrase, people are not doing things against you. They are doing them for themselves. And actually, if you can sit down and you can understand that other person's perspective, understand what's driving that behaviour, and start to have conversations that aren't just about the tasks and what needs to be done, but how we do things around here, makes such a difference. Because that's where you really make a change, isn't it? Where you're actually stepping out of the day-to-day drudgery and going, this isn't working. How can we work better together? And what do we need to do? And actually listen.
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing, I've always enjoyed being asked this, and I like asking it. But oh my word, when I first started, people really struggled to answer. And you just say, how are you feeling? You're in a crisis, or you haven't got an answer for something. And you just ask people, how are you feeling about this? And they look at you as if you asked them the hardest question. And I think once you can get a little more honest, because if you talk about your feelings, it becomes, I guess, much more rational, in the sense that you can then dig into the depth of what the challenges are, and more honesty comes out. So I think it's really important to remember that, because we forget about feelings, and feelings will often give you the answer to the challenge.
Well, I always say that that's emotional intelligence, isn't it? It's emotions are data. They are telling you something. If you're sitting there and you're getting really frustrated, that's telling you, if that is the feeling you're getting, that means that something needs to change. It's giving you that data, but actually, so that helps you give that information. But actually, in terms of getting people to change and getting change, using emotion to almost go like, we're in this really uncomfortable place where it feels really hard to get stuff done around here, and we all go home feeling drained.
Yeah.
If we can get to this utopia where we all work together, we're all going to feel this, and we're humans. We want to move away from pain towards, it feeling good. So actually using emotion to help drive that change, as well as understand why things need to change.
But critical, because people will show up very differently. If you think and work that way, that's the nature of the individuals we are. We're people. We're not machines.
Yeah. So you said to me that you're very much in the part of your career where you kind of want to give back. And obviously you've dedicated a lot of your career to innovation and all of that sort of thing. So there's two ways we can tackle this. What would you say to yourself 30 odd years ago or further? And what would you say to people that are starting out in their career in innovation?
I think it's really important that people don't feel they have to have all the answers, especially if you're in innovation. I mean, you're seen as this team that are going to come up with the future. It's a big challenge, and it's quite daunting. So I think don't think you've got to have all the answers, but it is vitally important you have the questions. And I think that's something I'd have told myself when I was in my early 30s. Kerry bought some land. They were going to build a factory, and my brief was come up with some ideas and we'll fill a factory. That was it. And I thought I'd have all the answers, and I didn't know where to start. So I just started talking to people and asking questions, and it helped me find the way forward. So you do need to ask the questions. Don't expect to have the answers. And the answers and ideas sit with everyone. And I think someone, and again, I go back to very early days in Kerry, a couple of people on a factory line I was chatting with had a brilliant idea about the way we were packing products. And it was just an absolutely crazy moment where we all thought, why didn't we think of that? So I think it's important to ask questions, to listen, and then you build on the thoughts around you. And these days, it'll be with futurists, it'll be with insights, it'll be with amazing individuals that think differently, it'll be with startups. But you join the dots. And I guess I've been very lucky through my life to work with a lot of amazing people, and I just join the dots. I don't have all the answers. I was with a gentleman on Saturday night in London, and he is working with Elon Musk at SpaceX, and he is working on a project to value SpaceX. And I won't tell you the figures. It is frightening. And it's his job to help investors understand why it's valued so highly. And I sat there just learning loads. I thought, how you've got to talk to people in different worlds, in different markets. You think about the beauty industry, you talk about the fashion industry, and the fact that the biggest trend at the moment is collaborating. So who's doing it? What are you learning? And look, you've got to talk to Gen Zs and Gen Ys about that. They're not my age. But go asking questions, and you join all those dots, and my God, you'll come up with ideas. So I think, don't feel you've got to have all the answers.
Well, no, I think that's really useful for people to listen to hear, because what you're saying is you need to stay curious. You don't need to know everything.
You never will.
No, you've got to be comfortable with not having all the answers.
But know how to find them.
Yes, and ask the right questions. So I think because my question was, what advice would you give people starting out now versus your younger self? But it sounds like it would be the same.
Well, be brave, but don't think you've got to have all the answers. Yeah, but find out. Yeah, find out. Be curious, as you said. Yeah, and enjoy it.
I love that, David. Look behind me. Be bold, be brave, be fearless.
Yeah, absolutely. And fearless is key. Yeah, you've got to trust your instincts sometimes. And look, I'll be honest. And we talked about winging it. More than half of the ideas launched over many years have been on instinct. I mean, I have to be honest. And then you put the rationale behind it. But instinct leads you ahead of insights. That's the key bit here.
We're going to leave it at that point. I'm going to get somebody on from Insights that's going to go, I can't believe that David Hamilton said.
Hey, insights are critical, but how do you get ahead of them? I'll sit with big insight companies and say, look, this is all amazing, but how do I step ahead of that?
Yeah, because actually I have this whole thing, because I worked in Insight for quite a few years, that the insight, it's not the historical data, is it? It's the so what are you going to do with that? And there has to be a leap of faith.
Well, you can look backwards to go forwards. And I know Charles at the Food People talks about that. And he's so right, because timing and retro and all of that stuff, it's all back. But you talk to a futurist and they're ahead, they're knitting very different points together. And the insights at some point will catch up. And it's a balance of the two, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much, David. I know lots of people will have really enjoyed that conversation. I know you're trying to retire a little bit, but you are still doing a bit of consultancy, aren't you? So if people want to get in touch, is the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm always happy to chat to individuals. I love it. And if I can help, then I like to help. But I'd say LinkedIn, just message me via LinkedIn. I'm there under David Hamilton. You'll find me. And if you've watched this, you'll recognise my thinning blonde hair on the pictures. So yeah, just send me a message, and if I can help, happy to help. If it's one question or it's, do you want to have a chat? Absolutely no problem. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David. And I will see everybody else next time. But be bold, be brave, be fearless. David Hamilton said so.
And don't think you got to have all the answers. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, David. Before we wrap up, there's 3 ideas from that conversation with David that I think are really worth sitting with. The first is that innovation isn't just about product. It can be about processes, technology, commercial models, or how teams collaborate across the business. And if in your business, innovation only sits inside the MPD function, it's very difficult for it to truly thrive. The second is the balance between insight and data and instinct. And I come from an insight background, so I know that data and research are hugely important. It's important to understand what has happened. But some of the most interesting ideas start with curiosity, with gut instinct, and people being willing to explore something before the data fully proves it. And the third is about leadership. If innovation isn't represented at the top table, which it isn't in so many businesses, it's very hard for a business to prioritise it properly. Innovation needs space, support, and cross-functional collaboration, not just pressure to deliver the next product launch. So if you're listening to this and you work in MPD, technical, commercial, all of those teams that are trying to drive innovation forward, maybe a question to reflect on is this: where does innovation really sit in your business? Is it something everyone feels responsible for, or is it something that quietly gets squeezed by the day-to-day pressures of delivery? Huge thanks to David for sharing his experience and perspective. I know it's going to have helped a lot of you out there. That's a wrap on this episode of The Fearless Foodie. If it hit home, subscribe, leave a review and share it with someone who's ready for less fluff and more real talk. And if you're ready to build a bolder, braver, more brilliant team, come find me at fearlessfoodies.co.uk. Until next time, be bold, be brave, be fearless.